Welcome to the Ronnie Resonance Podcast, a space for women in transition, becoming, and rebirth. I'm Ronnie, an intuitive guide, mentor, and multi-dimensional human learning right alongside you. Here we explore identity shifts, intuition, alignment, purpose, and the deeper truths you've been feeling but maybe haven't said out loud yet. This is where you return to yourself, gently, honestly, and with resonance. Take a breath. You're exactly where you're meant to be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ronnie Resonance Podcast. This episode is about why you feel drained around certain people and what it actually means. Because I think one of the most confusing things to experience is like walking away from someone or a situation and you're feeling completely drained and maybe you don't fully understand why, because it's not that anything really happened. Nothing was technically wrong in that interaction, but something in your body just feels off. You can have just like a completely normal conversation with someone and still leave feeling very exhausted. And I think a lot of people don't question that, because if there's no conflict, there's been no argument, there's no proof that something was actually wrong. And so it makes it look like everything seems fine on the surface. But what's happening is like you're having this internal experience where the internal part of you shifts before anything else has actually happened. When this happens, it's a lot of the time your body is just picking up on something that maybe your mind hasn't processed yet. And a lot of people override this instead of actually listening to what their body is trying to say. Because again, you don't have maybe some of the full-blown external proof a lot of the time, or, we've been conditioned since childhood to like ignore these feelings, or like if there's not an outward issue, then get over it type of thing. So I think that people chalk things up to just being like, oh, maybe I'm just burned out with this person or this situation and I am just doing too much, or, whatever. There's a multitude of reasons, but burnout is going to feel a lot more constant, whereas this situation is more specific. Like you can feel completely fine until you interact with a certain person, place, or thing. So for me, I actually experienced this a lot in my career as an esthetician. There were many times where I, especially in the beginning, when you're trying to build your clientele and you're afraid to like F anything up, so you start to like over accommodate people. And this doesn't have to just be your career, but like this is just obviously an example of it. But there's so many times in my job working with people, and if you're in a service-based job, like it doesn't have to be aesthetics, like I said, you probably will relate to this. But especially as a business owner, or especially as somebody that you care about and you don't want to hurt them, you are afraid to say no to them, or you feel like you always have to feel on or ready to perform. And just the biggest thing for me is just holding this emotional space for my clients, because I think a lot of people don't understand. And so like this part of my job, I obviously hold emotional space for people in what I do now, as far as like alignment readings and things like that. But as an esthetician, it was so different, because I am always having to like physically take care of my client and remember like each step that I'm doing and making sure that I'm not putting something on I'm not supposed to be putting on their skin, and all of these things. And so you have that thing you have to worry about. And then, I've had clients where they have something going on in their personal life, and so they start to like, I don't know, vent about that, and so things can get emotional. And so I felt like I was holding space for that. And then, as a service provider or a business owner in any capacity, the experience is always going to be so important, because that is what makes your business memorable. And so it's like you constantly are like, I don't want to do something wrong. I want to make sure, like, are they comfortable? Are they happy? Are they enjoying their experience? And so when you are in like hospitality, service providing, all of those things, you definitely have a billion different things that you have to think of aside from just simply servicing your client, especially if you are like an independent, like a solo esthetician or an independent business owner. It's all on you. And so a lot of that can lead to burnout, but a lot of it can cause you to think that it's burnout. So, and that was me. I really thought for a long time that I was just burnt out. Like, I've been doing this for 15 years and maybe I am just burnt out, but you know, this is my career. And so this whole time when this started happening, you know, this wasn't a new thing that started happening 15 years later. This started happening, you know, years before, but I wasn't picking up on it because I thought, you know, well, this is my only option and I have to make this work. And so I would just keep pushing through and like making excuses. And it was just easier to stay in that situation and continue seeing clients and at the rate that I was, and just how I was using my energy during that time, because that's what I thought, all I thought I could do. I didn't think there was another option. Like, I had become a spa owner because I thought that was the next thing that I was supposed to do. And so like I kept like adding to my plate or doing this or doing that. And so I just kept pushing. I later found out was that I wasn't actually just burnt out. Like, yes, was I burnt out a little bit? For sure. But I also think that I was finding that I wasn't necessarily aligned with this career path anymore. And when you spend 15 years in one identity, you know, it's easy to think like, oh yeah, like I spent this long in this job, so this is what I'm going to do forever. But there was a part of me who was kind of like, okay, I've done this for 15 years and things are so different than when I first started. And we've kind of like, things have just changed so much that I started to like just not enjoy being in the industry. And it was getting harder and harder to be with clients because there were so many things that the clients were changing due to like trends and social media and all of these things. And so it got harder to take my job seriously and for others to take my job seriously. And I was just like kind of over it. And trust me, I did not necessarily want to say like, yeah, this is it. Like, I'm done taking clients and, you know, whatever. So that was something that I had a really hard time navigating. And I think what ended up happening was I was kind of expecting like some major thing to come like slap me in the face and be like, this is what you need to do. And the weird part about that was that it wasn't something that slapped me in the face. It was literally waking up one day 15 years later and being like, do I want to do this another 5 years? And what's this going to look like? And did I even get to the success or the thing that I wanted to do in 15 years? Like, am I truly fulfilled in this? Is this offering me like what I've given so much of myself to, and I'm not really getting anything back in return? And so it's like, I'm supposed to be taking care of people, but like I can barely take care of myself. And so when all of that came like just crashing in, I was like, oh, okay, I need to move on. But when that came in, I also was having the realization at the same time that like my spiritual gifts were shifting. And so like I was in this place where like I could kind of see on the horizon what could be or what I could put my energy into. But I think the biggest thing to take away from that experience is that the clarity that came to me wasn't loud. It was more of a quiet realization that I just couldn't ignore anymore. And I think that's what's so confusing for people, because again, like we expect that someone's going to come say like, yeah, you're done, or just something major would change that would make you want to change. And that's not always how that works. And I don't think like I want to talk about feeling drained because, yes, that's a part of burnout, but feeling drained to me, like, I don't just mean that I was tired. Like, I'm talking like mental fog, like irritability, wanting to like jump out of my skin, just so testy. I had anxiety. I know I've talked about that on here where like I was having anxiety about going to work and I'm like, maybe I just don't like to dermaplane anymore. And it was like, no, like there's clearly something else going on. You've been dermaplaning at this point for 5 years, So there was that anxiety and anxiety of going to work. And, you in the industry, you always want to feel excited about like, oh, I got a whole day of clients. And, you're supposed to be like that all the time. And there were days where I have one client and I would be not excited. And then I would have a whole day and I still wasn't excited. And it was like, God, what's wrong with you? Like, are you just annoyed by everything? Are you just hating everything? Are you just being lazy? All of the things went through my head. And so there was a lot of like wanting to isolate myself because I think there was so much anxiety, so much overwhelm. And I honestly just had a lack of capacity at this point. Like I was starting to be like, yeah, like again, like I said a little bit ago, what do I have left in me to continue this career path after doing it for so long? So I think a lot of the time it's not just about exhaustion. Like I wouldn't say that the issue I was having was like, oh, I'm being so overworked, because around the time that I made this decision, it was the worst my business has ever done in 10 years. Like this past year has been the worst. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. But, at that point I was like, Ronnie, it's no longer about exhaustion. Like you don't have enough clients to sit here and be like, I'm so exhausted. If I was exhausted, it was about the hustle of trying to get clients in the door constantly. That was definitely part of that. But it definitely wasn't the full thing. There were much louder things, coming into my mind that was reminding me like, yeah, what are we doing? What are we doing here? So, it's an energy drain of all the things that come through your mind and like you don't realize is more about your energy draining and not necessarily just like, oh, I'm burned out and I need to take a break. It's like, no, like at this point you got to make some decisions. So what I was realizing was that this is all coming from a misalignment or like a lack of boundaries, where before, like when things just weren't working, clients weren't coming in the door, like I would just push harder and harder and harder. And it's like, I think, like I've said before, I do think that this was an eye-opening time of being like, okay, I've done this for a really long time. I feel like something's been off for a really long time. And the clients have fluctuated. I've had busy years. I've had really slow years, this year being the worst. And I think that I started realizing like how much I was just like constantly pushing just to make it work. And it's like, it didn't matter what the hell I did. I could be doing things perfectly. I could be doing things terribly. Like I was still getting similar outcomes. And a lot of it I realized was completely out of my control. Like I couldn't force clients to come in. I was overexerting myself for something that like it wasn't paying off. So that I was creating a lack of boundaries with my work. And I just wasn't allowing myself to take those pauses to actually listen to myself and what it is that I actually wanted. And I think that if something is feeling off internally, which is like, I think what I was experiencing that for sure, and you're giving more than you have, and you're not fully yourself, I feel like these are all signs that something is misaligned. Like, if there's something where you can't put your finger on it and it's like, well, okay, I know that I'm not lazy, and I know that I'm not, and I know that like these things are out of my control, and I know I can't force clients, and I know I can't, all of these things, then it kind of makes you start to wonder, like, is this even aligned for me anymore? So that's what started coming up for me. It was not even a question anymore about like, am I burned out? Do I need to take a break? It was more like, is this even aligned anymore? And I need to start to get real and navigate this, as uncomfortable as that is. And, all of this, like, misalignments, they can show up in like small ways, like really small ways too. Because like I've had, so I have like someone that reached out for one of my services, and I do them virtually. And this person had asked me, hey, can I do it in person? Because we were going to meet up for coffee anyway. And this person meant completely well. Like, there was nothing wrong with this, but they had asked me again a little bit later if they could do it in person. She fully respected the boundary when I said again, like, oh yeah, unfortunately, I just do this, online or virtually. And she fully respected that. And so I think that what helped me was that, as uncomfortable as that was to hold that boundary when it comes to my job, that person still trusted it, and they still booked the alignment reading online later on. So to me, it's like, it can be a little bit scary sometimes to be like, no, I'm standing firm in this thing and I don't want to do this or do that or whatever. But you'll find after you actually stand firm in it, like, that it pays off, because the person, like, usually will respect it. But then they may not, and it might show up a little bit deeper, as in like your close relationships, like your family. And this is something that, like, I love my family. Every family goes through their own things. I went to therapy and I learned a lot of coping mechanisms and boundary setting through therapy. And this prompted me to have hard conversations with family members. And, I had to write a letter, edit it, write it again, edit it, write it again, and then read it to a family member. And that was really hard to do. But within that, my therapist helped me move through boundaries and setting them by writing them out and really getting very clear on what the boundaries are, and knowing how to talk about these boundaries in a way that is not like mean or just so blunt. It's just like, I can say this with compassion for you, and also in a kind way, and still feel confident in my boundary. Because I think that if you're more defensive when you set that boundary, it's not going to land as good. But if you are confident and you're like, yeah, this is just my boundary, and you just state it again, like, that is a little bit more respected, because people were like, oh, okay, like, she means business. So I also had to just like redefine the access to me of like what that looks like. And that slowly, just from me removing some of that access, it slowly kind of came back to me, because I wasn't mean about it. I wasn't giving any expectations to it. I just started saying no when I didn't want to do something, and I would say yes when I did, or whatever. But if I didn't want to have to be around certain people, like, I don't have to be around certain people. And so that was something that I had to like navigate, not necessarily on my own because I had my therapist, but setting these boundaries was huge. I think it's hard for a lot of people to listen to themselves, like, or follow through when setting a boundary, because they might minimize it. They don't want to hurt people. They're used to just like overgiving. And so they don't already have boundaries really at all. So a lot of people have just learned to just disconnect from what their body is telling them, which is not always great, because you end up hurting yourself in the long run. But sometimes, again, like, our body sometimes tells you things before you can logically experience that in your mind. So sometimes, like, when you think about setting a boundary, you might get a little anxiety in your belly, or you might feel a certain way. And so that might make someone, like, it might deter them from wanting to actually set that boundary with someone. So I think if you've been feeling really drained around very specific people, the real question isn't just why is this happening? It's really more about how do you actually start recognizing what it is that's draining you, and what do you do about it without feeling guilty or completely changing your entire life overnight. Because noticing this feeling around certain people, places, or things, it's one thing. But I think knowing how to respond to it is something completely different. So how do you actually start recognizing what's draining you?